All right, ladies and gentlemen. So Friday in here, we introduced our first big unit of study in this course, a unit dealing with economics and wealth-related issues. And I told you that basically this unit will kind of have two different kind of sections to it. In the first section, we're going to spend some time looking at some hopefully very applicable economic concepts. Stuff that you can take, that you can apply in your own life, that will hopefully make you very financially successful and stable as you kind of transition into independent adulthood. And then in the second part of the unit, we're going to look at more of these like political national topics that at the end of the day come back to issues surrounding money. So along those lines, today we're going to jump into the first part of this unit, and we're going to look at a topic that a lot of people would not consider maybe the most exciting topic, but something that is really the nuts and bolts of all economic and financial related topics. And that is the concepts of supply and demand. I mean, you literally cannot take an economics course in high school or in college. You can't delve into personal finance without at least some level of understanding of what these abstract concepts mean. Because at the end of the day, if you understand, the basics of supply and demand, you understand a lot about human behavior. You understand a lot about trade. You know a lot about things like the stock market. And hopefully then delving into those kind of other topics is a lot smoother and easier of a transition having this base knowledge first. So I promise you, this stuff, though it might sound intimidating a little bit, we're getting into economic principles and supply and demand, it's not overly difficult. A lot of this that we're going to be discussing here is stuff that you see play out in the world around you all the time and know to be true. Now, when we're talking about demand, what we are referring to from an economic standpoint is the amount that people are willing and able to buy at different price points. Okay. So when we're talking about demand economically, we're not talking about just like a yes or no answer. Do you demand pizza? Yes, I demand pizza. No. Okay. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, well, how much of a certain good or service, how much of a certain product will you buy at different price points? And of course, all of us, have very different levels of demand at different price point of different products, right? So, I give the example here of something like Red Baron oven baked pizzas. Like we've all had, basic oven baked pizzas before. And so, I go to my local Walmart and I pick up a Red Baron oven baked pizza, and maybe like their sale price on it is like $4. Well, maybe at that $4 price point, I'm willing to buy one pizza. It's not a great price. It's not a super steal of a deal, but I'm hungry. I like Red Baron pizza. I could use a sodium boost. And so, I buy one for $4. But let's say I go back the next week, and that same Red Baron pizza is now on sale for $3. Well, at $3, hey, whereas before I bought, one, maybe I'll buy two at this price point and I'll throw one in the freezer for next week. The quantity that I am willing to buy at that price point has gone up. And then likewise, maybe I go back the next week and let's say that they have a clearance on them and they're $1 a piece. Well, I might literally fill up my freezer with these things, right? Like all of a sudden at $1, my demand is maybe I'll buy 20 of them because I view it as such a steal of a deal. We all do this, right? We know this again to be kind of basic human behavior, that our quantity that we wish to purchase changes depending on what the price is. Now, why demand is so important, okay, is that especially if you are somebody that runs a small business, okay, or you're your own kind of contractor, like maybe you're a freelance carpenter or something, okay, it is vitally important for you as a business owner to understand what the demand for your product or services are. How much are people willing to pay? Are people willing to purchase this a decent amount? Because if they're not, well, then you're going out of business. If you're not in tune to customer demand, you're not going to be in business for long. You're not going to be financially successful. Now, some other things that we know about demand to be true, and my example kind of showed this, is that, the general rule of thumb about demand is that generally the more something costs, the less that people are going to buy of it. And likewise, the cheaper something is, generally the more that they are willing to purchase. Again, you doubt this, go to Costco, go to Sam's Club. You ever seen those people before at Sam's Club that like show up and they have like one of those big pallet carts, and it looks like they're literally buying like a year's worth of stuff, right? Or you go and you buy ramen noodles, right? It's like you get your ramen noodles and they're 10 cents a pack, so you buy, a case of 50 of them. That's how humans operate. It's basic human behavior relating to wealth and purchasing. Some other things that we generally know about demand is that generally the wealthier you are, generally the less you care about price. So for you, this whole rule, it's still there, right? It's still there. Like we all love a good deal, but if you're super wealthy, you're probably not going to spend your time. Probably. Now I say probably. Remember, economics, like political science, is a social science. It studies human behavior. Human behavior is fickle. There is no absolutes. So you might have somebody who's a multimillionaire that is the cheapest penny pincher you've ever seen. It happens. But for the most part, what we know as a trend is that generally the wealthier you are, the less you're going to care about price fluctuations. The more the quantity that you are purchasing is going to remain pretty stable. Another thing that we know to be true as well is that generally the more that something is a necessity, the less you're going to care about price. Your quantity consumed is probably going to stay fairly level. So I think about something just like, the cost of water. I get my monthly water bill. Okay, my water provider is Westview Water Authority. So I get my bill from Westview Water Authority. And, let's say that, my bill comes and it's a high bill. Let's say it's like, $70 for a month or something. I'm going to be like, holy smokes, that's a big bill. But at the end of the day, right now, is it probably going to, affect my behavior all that much? Maybe. Maybe if it goes off the charts all of a sudden, maybe I say to my family, like, hey, we need to cut back a little bit. We need to make sure we're turning off the water when we're brushing our teeth or something along. But chances are, especially given my life right now, where I got young kids and I'm running the dishwasher and, doing laundry like literally 24/7, I'm probably going to say, oh, well, it's a necessity. I know I use a lot of water. It is what it is, and I'm just going to pay it and move on. If you're somebody, that takes a medication, super expensive medication, to treat a chronic illness or problem, you're somebody that has HIV, AIDS, are you going to sit there when the price of HIV, AIDS, medication goes up, or you're going to be like, I'm not paying that? No, you have to. So you're just going to deal with it and move on. And then finally, one of the things that we also know that kind of artificially skews demand, that oftentimes causes these spikes in demand for a product, is things like perception of quality. If we think that something is a quality item, we're generally willing to pay higher prices for it, right? It doesn't have the price point doesn't have as much of an impact on whether we're going to buy it or not. Same thing with uniqueness. I always bring up like the example of something like a buffalo chicken pizza. Every pizza place nowadays has a buffalo chicken pizza, but still none of them are quite as good and special and as unique as the Frank's buffalo chicken pizza. So are people willing to, go to Frank's just to get that? You bet your butt they are. And then things like advertising. Why do companies advertise? They oftentimes advertise to try to set their product apart, to artificially promote demand. Hey, you want this? You want this, and you're willing to pay this price for it. And then meanwhile, it might not be all that different from like 50 other products that are out there on the market. Now, one of the comments I get all the time, and I referred to this in the video I made last week with the lovely DJ Econ, is that a lot of students, I think, get super intimidated about any kind of mention of economics, because they'll say things like, oh, I heard it deals with stuff like math. I'm terrible at math. I don't like math. Like, that's why I'm in here. I didn't want to be dealing with math any more than I had to. Well, I think why people respond that way is that oftentimes, especially in like higher level economics courses, there is a decent amount of graphing that is oftentimes done. Okay. And why they oftentimes will graph is it's just a way of displaying things like supply and demand data in a way that you can easily look at and say, oh, well, that now makes sense to me. Okay. So probably and especially if you have friends that are currently taking economics, it's the beginning of the year, they're probably doing the same kind of stuff right now. Chances are you might see them walking around with, worksheets that have all sorts of graphs. Well, what a lot of those graphs are what are called demand curves. Okay. All a demand curve is one of the most basic graphs imaginable. You have basic XY axis. You put price on one axis, you put quantity on the other, and then you plot your data. And then you take those points that you have just plotted and you draw a line through them to connect the dots. It's a way of visually illustrating people's demand for a certain product. So I mentioned, that things like understanding demand is essential for any kind of small business. So one of the things I always use as an example is pizza. I personally worked and managed pizza shops for 15 years of my life. I started working at a pizza shop when I was 17 years old. I worked there throughout college. I would always work there in the summers. Even when I started teaching, I worked in pizza shops for a number of years. I had kids, so I was paying $40 a week for boxes of diapers and formula and everything. So I was still picking up shifts at the old pizza shop, and I never minded it because I enjoyed just kind of running the business. I always enjoyed the economic side of things. Okay. And to me, I always use pizza shops as an example because I think they're just like a really easy business model for us to understand. Well, in terms of my point here with demand data was years ago, when I was at the pizza shop. So my buddy Brian, who I would work for, owns a Vocelli Pizza. Okay. He in fact was the very first franchisee ever of the Vocelli company. And they now have like 100 shops all over the place. You guys are way too young, but originally the company was called Pizza Outlet. And what ended up happening was they did a market study. Again, they did some level of demand data analysis and collecting, and they found out that most people believed that Pizza Outlet made it sound like it was just like a cheap mass-produced pizza. It's like basically came out of a cardboard, or a prepackaged box, and we just threw it in the microwave, and here you go, Pizza Outlet pizza. So they decided, okay, well, we want it to sound authentic Italian, so they just made up this random name, Vocelli. There's no Italian connection of the company whatsoever. But anyway, why I bring this point up? So the one summer when I was in college, I was working for Vocelli's. And I remember the CEO at the time comes in and he's talking to the owner of the store, my buddy Brian, and he turns to me and goes, "Hey, listen, we're thinking of adding 2 new menu items to our menu. We're thinking of adding this spinach and artichoke dip stuff." Okay, which would like come with an order of breadsticks, and then you would dip it into the dip. And we're thinking of adding, wait for it, cheesecake to the menu. Because I don't know about you, but when I have just eaten 5 slices of pepperoni pizza, I feel like topping it off with a slice of cheesecake. So, basically they're thinking of adding these to the menu. He said, how would you like to, make a little bit of money? We'll pay you hourly. We'll pay you, $10 an hour or whatever. And we just want you to walk door to door in some of the neighborhoods in this area. And basically what they gave me these big kind of color photographs, high resolution photographs of the product. And I would knock on the door and I'd say, hey, I'm from Vocelli Pizza. I have a few questions. We're doing a customer survey. And if you answer it, I'll give you a coupon for like a $5 extra large pizza or something. So most people, of course, since they were being bribed, were willing to talk to me. And all I would do is I'd say, okay, this pizza, just to tell you a little bit about, or the spinach and artichoke dip. You get 8 breadsticks, and the container is this size, and we warm it up and we serve it warm. So, given this description and what the product looks like, would you pay $6 for this? And they let me know. Well, yeah, I think I'd pay $6, and I'd mark down that data. And then, all right, would you pay $4 for this? $3. And I go the other direction. Oh, would you pay $10 for this? And I collected all of this demand data. And then what did the company do? They then took all that demand data, they plotted it as a demand graph, they analyzed it, and they used it to, in part, help them determine what price they wanted to set that at, or if they wanted to have that product even on their menu in the first place. So Spin Shark went over very well at first. The cheesecake, not so much. I remember all the data. And this, again, shows you how important this can be for a business. All the data said people do not want to buy cheesecake from a pizza place. And yet the CEO was so fixated, oh, we got to have a dessert, that he added it anyway. And I think we maybe sold 5 slices of that ever. I think the employees of the store ate more pieces of this cheesecake than customers ever did. So anyway, again, I put up here just like a basic summary of like maybe my demand. Okay, my personal demand data for Red Baron Pizza, back to my other example there. So, at $6, well, that's too expensive. I'm not buying it. But, at $5, maybe I'd buy one. $4, I'd still maybe buy one. $3, maybe I'd buy two. $2, I'd maybe buy three. $1, I'd maybe buy four. If they're free, I'll just take everything you got, right? Just stock up. And then all that these economists and these business people do is they then take those intersection points. So, right, $5, he's buying one, boop, and put a dot there. $4, he's still buying one. $3, he's buying two, boop, put a dot there. $2, he's buying 3 of them. $1, he's buying 5, boop, put a dot there. And after you've plotted all of your dots, you just basically freehand draw a line. And the reason why this line is always kind of curved like you see here is that, again, we know somewhere way out here, quantity is just going to become all you got, right? Like, okay, if our price on this axis is low enough, I'm just going to take everything, give me 1,000 of them. Meanwhile, we also know that on this line, eventually my demand is going to be 0. As things get too expensive, it's going to kind of curve right up next to that line. So that's all that this is saying. I'm never going to have you construct one of these, but I oftentimes think that they can help us kind of wrap our minds around situations. So I just wanted to make sure that I exposed you to that and kind of explained what the heck those were. Now, again, demand is just one side of the story. Okay, so demand is the buyer. Demand is the consumer. How much am I going to purchase? Supply is the exact opposite. Supply is the amount that people are willing and able to sell of a good or service at different price points. Okay, so again, having worked in pizza shops for 15 years, I'm pretty darn good at making, homemade pizzas. I have my own little propane powered 900 degree pizza oven that I bust out on the back deck, and I'm pretty good still at slinging pies, and I make my own dough and I make my own sauce, and it's an art for sure. So maybe if one of you said, hey, Mr. Heiseroth, I hear you make good pizza, I'll give you $10 for it. All right, maybe after school I'd be willing to, fire up the oven and make one pizza. Like, that's maybe enough to motivate me. But let's say, somebody said, hey, what about $15? I'll give you $15. Well, $15 all of a sudden is way more worth my time, right? It's like, okay, well, I was supposed to coach a soccer practice tonight, but hey, $15 times 10 pizzas, that's a lot of money. I'll do that instead. Or let's say that, somebody says, hey, your pizza's so good, like, I'll pay you $20 for it. Well, $20, heck, I'll quit my job and I'll just stay home and make these pizzas all the time. What we know about supply is that it's the exact opposite of demand, at least in terms of how people behave, right? Demand, if something's cheap, we buy a lot of it. From a supply standpoint, if something is cheap, are we really financially motivated to produce? Are we really financially motivated to work hard? And I always give the prime example. Think about the supply of labor. Okay, many of you in here, I know from reading your information forms, have jobs, right? You have jobs, you maybe work 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, whatever. typically the more money we make, the more motivated we are to work more hours. And if you doubt that, look at something like overtime pay. My father-in-law is a postal worker, and he's now in his 60s, so he's kind of up there seniority wise, and he just kills the overtime. He does like 60 hours of overtime, or 60 hours a week, 20 hours of overtime pretty much every week. Why? Because he gets paid way more, and so he's super motivated to supply his labor to the post office, right? If you're making $7.25 an hour and it's a Saturday night and you have off of work, and your buddy calls you up and says, hey, will you pick up my shift? And you're only going to get paid minimum wage. Are you really motivated to pick up that extra shift? But if he calls you up and says, hey, I'll make sure that you get paid like $15 an hour. Well, then again, all of a sudden you might be far more motivated to put forward that effort. So because things are exactly the opposite, just like you have a demand curve for everything, you also have supply data. Hey, I'm willing to produce this much at this different prices. And again, if a business owner or an economist takes all this data and plots it on a basic XY axis, you always get a curve that this time will trend up. Okay? Now, again, why am I showing you graphs whatsoever? And just a quick review: demand, buyer; supply, seller. Demand, cheaper equals buy more. Supply, cheaper equals sells less. Why I show you these graphs whatsoever, why they're important, why businesses and economists use them, is let's say I have a product, like my Red Baron pizza example or something again, and I take all my demand data and I plot it on a graph. And I take all of my supply data and I plot it on a graph. What you will always notice happens is that those two lines are going to intersect. Where they intersect is our ideal price for that product. That's the ideal perfect price. So for this, maybe Red Baron pizzas, maybe that ideal price is like $4.25. Why this is the ideal price is, again, if you think about what this kind of shows us, let's say I'm a business, right? And I'm selling Red Baron pizzas, and let's say I decide, you know what, I'm gonna set my price at $10. Heck with this point here. I'm just going to ignore everything I learned in POD class, and I'm going to set it at $10 instead. Well, $10, our demand is 5. Only 5 people are willing to buy it at $10. But at $10, supply-wise, it makes sense for me to supply 40. So if I have produced 40, but I can only sell 5, what do I have on my hands here? That's called a surplus. That's called waste, right? Like why oftentimes do stores put stuff on clearance? Because they have too much of it, they have a surplus, and they just need to get it off the shelf so they can get something else to sell that people actually want. Waste and surpluses cost businesses money. I remember when I worked at the pizza shop, there's this one kid that used to drive me crazy. He would show up, it'd be like a slow Monday night shift, and I'd be in the back doing some paperwork or inventory or whatever, and he'd come in and he would spin, we would like pre-spin our dough for our pizzas, and he would spin like 40 pizza crusts out and put them all on the racks all ready to go. And I'd come out there and I'd say, you dolt, like, we're probably going to sell 20 pizzas tonight. And you just spun 40. So we're going to end up throwing away 20 of those, and they probably cost $1 a pop. So you just cost us $20. Waste is not good for a business. Likewise, let's say that you're somebody that's like, okay, that here's the intersection price, but you're like, you know what? I'm going to set my price real cheap. I want to get some people in the store. I'm going to set it real cheap. You're going to put it at $2. Well, again, $2, it makes sense for you to maybe supply 5, but demand is going to be 40. So if you have 40 people show up, but you only got 5 pizzas, are those people going to be happy? No. Shortages oftentimes alienate customers. I remember at the pizza shop one time we ran out of pepperoni. And we literally couldn't get any more. We used to borrow some from another pizza shop, and we pay them back with pepperoni later on. And we could not get any pepperoni. I remember I ran to a grocery store, couldn't get any pepperoni. And I literally, that shift, I swear, it was like every single person calling on the phone. Oh, I'd like 5 pepperoni pizzas. And I'd say, I'm sorry, we're out of pepperoni tonight. And people would like have this like incredulous reaction, like, you're a pizza shop and you don't have pepperoni? Click. I think about the amount of money that we lost on that shift just from canceled orders or people that were going to order that didn't, but also think about the long-term loss. Next time that person is having a party and they're going to call and order 5 pizzas, are they going to call the unreliable place, the place that had the shortage? Or are they going to maybe call this other place that they just found out about? A place that ended up being pretty decent in its own right. The cumulative effects of maybe one shift of shortage at a pizza shop could be thousands and thousands of dollars lost. So it's important to always kind of operate around that equilibrium price. And that's why things like gas, gasoline, we all know that gasoline always kind of just stays right around that same price, right? You go to BP, you go to Sunoco, you go to 7-Eleven, like they all tend to be right around that same price. Why? Because there's not really any discernible differences between gasoline. I don't know many people that are fine gasoline connoisseurs and, I only, pump the finest Sunoco gasoline. No, right? It's basically the same product. And so they know that, hey, we all need to operate around that price point or else we're going to lose money. People are going to go somewhere else or we're going to have a major shortage on our hands. I always tell the story, and I'll close here because I know that, again, this is a lot. And my hope is that you're seeing that it's a lot, but it's not hard. It's just making yourself kind of slow down and think about things. I always tell the story, though, that, my first year teaching, so that was, I guess, fall of 2005. And that was the year that Hurricane Katrina hit. And nationwide, there was major supply shortages of gasoline. And I remember, what was it? The BP? Is it the BP that's down in Millville? And I don't have anybody to respond to me because I'm just speaking to an empty room right now. But I remember one of the local gas stations put their price, they kept it super low. Every other gas station, price shot up after Hurricane Katrina hit. Like gas was over $4 a gallon. And that one gas station was super low. Well, I remember hearing a student tell me about it. So I drive down there after school, and I am not kidding you. There was a line of cars coming out of the parking lot and all the way up the street. And sure enough, they ran out of gas. So you always got to kind of operate around that point. Now, we're going to stop here because, again, I know that was a decent amount of information to throw at you all at once. Tomorrow, when we come back in, we're going to kind of finish up the second half of this kind of 2-part lesson where we are then going to talk about what causes prices to change. And of course, the end answer is it's ultimately changes in supply and demand. Okay, so we'll look at that more tomorrow, and then we're going to apply that and then look at how this plays out in things like the stock market later on this week.